let's jump in. Anybody that joins us after, this is of course being recorded, so we'll get a private YouTube link out to the members likely tomorrow afternoon. First of all, thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been 6 months through the looking glass. So Susan and I did a webinar almost exactly 6 months ago this week, where we thought it might be rather useful to inform the members of a little platform called Zoom, which most of us hadn't heard of 7 months ago, but here we are relying on it for our bread and butter business day in, day out. We're joined today. I'd like to run through, members might want to go to the speaker view at the top right of their screen if it's too overwhelming to have all the windows on screen. I'll run through the various attendees for this, our 6-month roundtable. First of all, we're delighted to be joined by Harry Moseley, who is the Chief Information Officer for Zoom Incorporation. Might well be one of the busiest CIOs on the planet just now. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. So we're delighted he can join us for the next half hour or so. And we'll kick off things with Harry and a sort of look at what's gone on with Zoom in terms of its explosive growth the last 6 months and how it's become integral to all of our practices. We've also given Harry lots of feedback on some of the features that we would love to see added, and I dare say he wakes up screaming doorbell in the middle of the night, thanks to the emails of recent months. On our NADN roundtable, I'm delighted that we can be joined. Of course, Susan Guthrie is co-hosting. There are very few mediators in the world, let alone America, that are at the 10,000 hour mark, which is a sort of prerequisite for some degree of expertise. And you're one of the few veterans of Zoom mediation, so I'm delighted that you can co-host with us again, Susan. I'd like to run through our roundtable members, and we'll be getting feedback on everybody's experiences of the platform and ODR over the next hour and a half or so. So in alphabetical order, Simeon Baum in New York, Jay Berman, California, Judge Ken Fields, Arizona, Simon Harrison, Florida, John Miles of Miles Mediation, Georgia, Doug Noll in California, Susan Perin in Texas, who am I missing? Edna Sussman, New York, Howard Vogel, Tennessee, and Larry Watson in Florida. And we're also joined by Simeon Baum, who's a legal technology expert out in California. So without further ado, Harry, again, thank you for joining us. I think we've got 30, 40 minutes. Now, I should say by way of background, we've been in contact with you and your team, and we've already given you a sort of heads up as to some of the features that the mediation and arbitration community, which has embraced Zoom. I think, Susan, you said 95% of your respondents.
98.
98%. My figures with NADN members, there's 1,100 plus members. We think it's in 90% plus. I think that the people that said otherwise probably didn't respond to the survey correctly. I think it's the vast majority of members are now reliant on Zoom to complete our mediations and arbitrations. So if you would, Harry, give us a bit of background. It's been an extraordinary year for Zoom as a corporation. I think there are very few companies in history that have had to scale their infrastructure 1,000% or more in the space of a few weeks. So give us a little background, if you would, what's been going on at Zoom, and some of the feedback you've had from different industries, including our own.
Great. Happy to do that. I'm just going to, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Darren. Great to be here, Susan, etc., and with your esteemed colleagues. So let me just share some content. So I'm using the current release of Zoom, and that allows you to share the content as a virtual background, which is what I'm doing right now. And I find it a nicer way to share content because I'm sort of like in the picture. I can move myself around. I can make myself a little smaller. So I'm
new toys. Love it.
Yeah. Well, that's what we do at Zoom. It's like we innovate at speed and scale, and that's why you love the platform. And I know you've got asks about doorbells and chat features and breakout rooms. And so we're busy at work, you know, sort of enhancing the platform all the time. And if people would like, we're actually hosting our annual user conference this year virtually over Zoom. Susan's nodding, so that's good. So she's aware of it. So Susan, if you want to share with everybody the details of the Zoomtopia, we call it. It's our annual user conference. We used to do it in person in San Jose. I think the last year we had something like 3,000 people there in person. This year, the whole thing's being done virtually on October the 14th and 15th. And that's where we'll be announcing all sorts of new features and new capabilities and expansions of the platform, etc. And so I would urge everybody to join that, because it's always a great event. And as it's going to be virtual this year, you can join from the comfort of your homes. All right, so let's see if I can do this. Why is this? That's very interesting. Okay, all right. So I'm going to talk a little about the future of work and the next normal. Just by way of introduction, I joined Zoom 2.5 years ago. I'm their global CIO. Prior to Zoom, I was the CIO for KPMG, the US firm. I was the CIO for the Blackstone Group. I was the co-CIO and head of investment banking technology at Credit Suisse. I was the chief technology officer for UBS, the Americas, and did a fintech startup before that. I actually retired from KPMG in December of 2017 after 40 years of working in the tech industry. I kind of like said to myself, I've had enough. I've been very fortunate, and I wanted to do something else with the rest of my life. And Zoom came knocking at the door saying, we were looking for a global CIO and we'd like you to be it. And it was like 4 days after I retired. And I said, guys, it's like, you know, I just retired. It's like, give me a break. I've only been out for 4 days. And but I fundamentally knew that, you know, so the notion of collaborating locally, nationally, and globally, you know, we wanted to do it. We built out all these collaborative spaces, which helped. But that's for people who are physically in one place, and not everybody is in one place. And the idea of like traveling, you know, whilst we did it extensively, you know, didn't really solve the problem either. So looked at this technology, met Eric Yuan, our CEO and founder, and thought, oh, you know, I kind of like what these guys are doing, and it could be a lot of fun. That was 2.5 years ago. Gone like that. Poof. It's like, you know, where has 2.5 years gone? Oh my God. Said to my wife the other day, it was 2.5 years. And she's like, you must be joking. Isn't it like only a year? So, so what's the mission at Zoom? It's like, you know, about keeping everybody connected, enterprises connected, etc. You know, when COVID hit, I remember it very well. It was, I was on a flight back from Zurich. I was at Davos. It was Saturday afternoon, January the 25th. We were taxiing down the runway, and I was reading, you know, I think USA Today or, you know, some English newspaper, and I put the paper down in the pocket of the seat, and then I said, there must be something we could do. And then this woman next to me said, were you talking to me? And I go, no, I was just thinking out loud. And so we got into a conversation, because I was thinking, you know, I was reading about China, I was reading about quarantine, I was reading about shutting down, I was reading about schools being closed, and I was saying to myself, there must be something that we at Zoom can do to help. And so she said, like what? And I said, like, I don't know, it's like, I think I should talk to the CIO for the World Health Organization. So she goes, I think I can help you with that, because she's the head of innovation at the United Nations. So that was about sort of 2 o'clock Saturday afternoon, Central European time. At 10 o'clock on Monday morning, I was talking to the CIO for the World Health Organization. And then it's like, it was just a blur as we went through that. And so just some things about our company profile. Founded 2011 by Eric Yuan. We're north of 3,400 employees globally. When I joined 2.5 years ago, just to put things in perspective, we were 800. 19 offices around the world, all closed. Nobody's working in a single office. Nobody's going back to an office before the middle of next year, at the earliest. We have 17 global colos around the world. We went public 18 months ago on NASDAQ. Our Q2 revenues were 663.5 million. And you can see there, our, you know, 355% year-on-year growth. Back in December of 2019, you know, we were hosting 10 million people on the platform. We thought that was a lot. And then, whoop, oh, March, 200 million. It's kind of like, and it's like, how did that happen? And then, whoop, you know, sort of April, like, you know, 300 million. Just a couple of other stats. It's like in January of 2020, we were processing 100 billion annualized meeting minutes, and that went to 2 trillion in April, which is, you know, pretty staggering numbers, right? And I think it's, you know, sort of when you look at our net promoter score, when you look at our service level, when you look at our customer satisfaction rates, you know, to maintain those high rates in that sort of growth trajectory is testimony to the technology architecture that Eric designed and has been building over the last several years. And so, so that's it's really rather impressive. And I've been in this doing, you know, technology for now 43 years. And, you know, I built trading systems and settlement systems and all sorts of, you know, interesting financial services platforms. And to be able to handle the growth like this has been pretty amazing. We have these are our data centers around the world. You can see, you know, we have Canadian data centers for housing Canadian data. We've got the US data centers. We opened up one in South America. We've got Europe and we've got Asia. And this is how we sustain sort of the high levels of capability that we have, the high service levels that we have, because of that architecture and the way we're able to leverage our colos and leverage cloud technology. Talking to CIOs, everybody says it's kind of like, you know, universally, if we didn't have the cloud, it would have been, you know, as tough as it has been for the last 8 months going through the pandemic, particularly here in the US. But if we hadn't had the cloud, it would have been a lot harder. And people also say that about Zoom as well. If we didn't have Zoom, it's kind of like it would have been a lot harder. Cocktails alone would have been, you know, sort of really bad, but at least you can, you know, get on a video and that makes it a little bit more, you know, sort of fun. Just to talk a little bit about the future of work, it's changed forever. I think we would all agree on that. You know, it's like, we've evolved. We've gone from sort of working at work to living at work, or as my wife says, sleeping at work. And, you know, and we're continuing to evolve. So that's a few comments on this. I'm going to go through this stuff really fast, Darren. So,
Sure.
But I think it's all important as well. So, you know, it's kind of like the first normal, or what I frequently reference as life before Corona. You know, on-site collaboration, huddle rooms. We took down all the walls. We took down all the cubicles, and we made sort of like open collaboration spaces. Well, certainly, you know, sort of in many industries, perhaps not in the legal industry, because, you know, privacy is, you know, what you're all about, right? But office environments got very dense. Teams sat together, and you had to be, you know, physically in the office. That was expected. The employer expected people to be in the office. It's like, you know, this is your office address. It's like you would recruit locally. 97% of people worked actually in an office, and only 3% worked, you know, sort of at home. And then we went to this sort of living at work where, you know, managing, you know, now you're working at home. Now you're, you know, being a caregiver for your family, and you're being an educator too, because your children are home and you got to like teach them. And so that makes it really hard. I remember talking to somebody, him and his wife are both working at home. They have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. The kids didn't understand what mommy and daddy are doing working at home. They should be reading books, coloring, playing games, etc. What's this thing called work? They put duct tape in their apartment and taught the kids when mommy and daddy are on this side of the line, they're at work. They can't be disturbed. And we learned how to use personal tools for business and business tools for personal use. It's like I was talking to one of our clients, you know, his 6-year-old is getting educated on Zoom at home, and he's talking to his father-in-law, you know, over Zoom at night. And his father-in-law is using Zoom to connect to the family globally. And he goes to me, it's kind of like, you know, everybody's using Zoom. You know, I got a 6-year-old and I got a 62-year-old. It's kind of like, you know, it's so it's like it's easy. And managers had to develop new skills. It's like, you know, managing virtual workers is very difficult, very different to managing people in person. And now you're sort of like, you know, this notion of living at work, distractions. How many cattails do we see going across the screen? I was on a board meeting, as an example, the CEO's making his presentation. His wife comes into the office and says, I need you to hold the baby. And he goes, sweetheart, it's like I'm in the middle of a board presentation. She goes, that's an answer to a different question. He takes the baby, continues with the board presentation. Nobody says anything. And of course, you know, we want to navigate, you know, companies and employees are navigating how to work virtually and securely, and we'll talk more about that. And then finding the balance. People talk about fatigue of video. It's not fatigue of video. I will argue that based upon the following. If you went to your office and you had 7:30 to 7:30 p.m. back-to-back meetings in your office, you would be exhausted. If you do 7:30 to 7:30 p.m. Over video, you'll be exhausted. The point is that in the office, you don't do that. In the office, I can come and I go to Darren, hey, Darren, knock on the door. You got a couple of minutes, I have a quick question for you. Hey, you know, Susan, I'm running out for a coffee. Are you free? You want to come out for a coffee? It's kind of like, you know, Ken, you know, are you free for lunch today? Let's grab lunch. You have all those sort of unplanned events that happen in the office. You don't have those when you're working at home. No one's going to come knocking on my door and say, hey, Harry, you want to pop down to the village for a cup of coffee? If they did, that would be kind of odd and kind of nice. The point is that when you're working, you know, working at home or working from anywhere, you've got to create those unplanned breaks in your day. Otherwise, you will be fatigued. And so, you know, so I've got this. This is how I get my break. That's my 7-month-old golden doodle. Here he is. And if I don't take a break and walk him, then he's going to make a mess in my office, and that will take longer to clean up than to walk. So, so you got to have some sort of distraction like that. He's my office mate.
Yes.
Just quickly, a few more slides, and then I'll be quiet and happy to take questions. Not going back to the old normal, you know, sort of that's gone forever. You know, sort of the office environment's going to become very, very sanitary with perspex screens, plastic screens, you know, 2 or 3 people in the elevator. Video, you know, video is the new voice. That was part of what Zoom was founded on. People now understand video is the new voice. I think you guys get it too. It's kind of like I heard, you know, when we were getting ready for this event, talking about sort of how you're using Zoom. It's so much more productive. It's so much more effective. M&A bankers who are, you know, typically on the phone or in-person meetings, article in the paper said, they you know, I'm not going to fly to London anymore for a 1-day meeting. I think that's great. It's like reduce the carbon footprint. They're more productive and they're more effective. And then, you know, trust and security. I mean, these are top of mind things, you know, sort of to conduct business, whether it's the law business, the legal business, whether it's financial business, whether it's healthcare, you know, any transactions, whether, you know, you think about schools, you think about sort of people conducting, you know, personnel reviews, it all has to be secure. And so it's top of mind. And I know, Darren, you asked me to talk about sort of the security topics. You know, earlier this year, you know, it was like February and March, where there was, you know, we went to 300 million people. 300, you know, you got 300 million people on your platform, from some of the largest enterprises in the world to government organizations, 100,000 schools in 25 countries, people doing yoga classes, people learning how to play the violin, people learning how to play the drums, people, you know, sort of telling jokes, happy hour, dinner parties, what have you. We became the go-to. And so we drew a lot of attention from a lot of people, and so we had to pivot, and we pivoted our entire engineering team on April the 1st to focus on security and privacy. And we also made a statement, not just Eric, but the entire executive team, that we were going to raise the bar on security and privacy, not for Zoom, but for the industry at large. And I'd like to sort of say that again, for the industry at large, because security and privacy was okay, but it can't be okay. It has to be sort of like super. It has to be extreme. And so just to highlight 5 of the things that we did during that 90-day pivot was we took all the security controls, bundled them together, and created that security icon. So you can lock the meeting, have control over who can share content, who you can reject people. And by the way, when you reject a person from a meeting, they cannot come back to the meeting. So if you see somebody odd turning up, even if it's somebody you know they shouldn't be in the meeting, go to the security icon, remove them, and then they're gone. They'll kind of come back to that meeting. We also changed the default settings for different domains. So like in EDU, the default setting is with waiting rooms, nobody can share, and so on and so forth. We also changed our data center routing so that for enterprises, they could actually select which geographical region they want their meetings hosted in. We also announced Zoom 5.0 and rolled out AES 256 GCM encryption, which is the highest one can get at this point in time. We did our first acquisition of a company called Keybase, which was a team of cryptographers to help us build out our end-to-end encrypted service. We published that paper May the 22nd. That was reviewed by a variety of different chief information security officers globally. We created a CISO council, had them critique it. We got law enforcement agencies to take a look at the paper. We built the platform, and now we're piloting that with our about 1,000 different entities, and we expect to release that in the next few weeks. And I think this will be particularly interesting for everybody on this call, because this is true end-to-end encryption, where the encryption key is being created by the endpoint, by your laptop. And the only people who get that encryption key are people who are actually in the meeting. There is nothing more secure than that. And that'll be available for free and for paid users. There's no additional charge. Besides those 5 things, we also did 100 other things from a security and privacy perspective, so I could spend the next hour talking about some of them, but I think you've got the picture. We're raising that bar. So navigating to the next normal, sort of some technology will never be the same again. We're going to be a complete digital workplace. It's all about being simple, seamless, and frictionless, and becoming more of a paperless society, and I think that's very exciting. And the way we operate has changed. The myths of the past have gone forever. 2 more slides and I'm done, Darren. Myths of the slides have been proven wrong. Myths being people can't work effectively from home. Oh, yes, they can. They can actually work very effectively from home. They can actually be more productive working from home. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people. Many millions of people. It doesn't work for every culture either, but it does work for some. And they're happier, and employers can't accommodate everybody back in the office. Building used to hold 1,000 people. Now it'll hold about 300 people because of social distancing. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, said yesterday he doesn't expect to have more than 60% at the most ever back in offices. And also employers recognize they can employ people from anywhere in the world. They don't need to employ people locally anymore. If you're in Indiana, if you're in Alaska, it's all about managing the work and not managing the people now. And you can employ people from other countries and don't have to relocate them and get a work visa. So this is pretty cool. And then of course, the doorbell. I had to put in the doorbell. Darren, this is your doorbell.
Thank you. It's a beautiful doorbell.
It's a beautiful doorbell. I'm going to get a real doorbell and I'm going to send it to you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity of being here today and talking to everybody. Happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Harry. I appreciate the doorbell. A software doorbell would be even more appreciated. We'll continue to make noises about that. So that was fascinating. Thank you, Harry. I think it's to some degree it reaffirms what we've already found with our mediation arbitration practices. If folks would unmute their microphones, because we'll go to some questions for Harry. So to allude to the doorbell, we've been emailing Harry and team the last few months, and I had asked members way back in April to sort of give us some ideas of what they perceive as missing from the current Zoom platform. We didn't touch on it precisely in the presentation there, but the one feature that's been more important than anything else to our industry has been the breakout rooms, of course, because it guarantees confidentiality for parties to go into caucus, enable shuttle diplomacy back and forth with confidentiality guaranteed. So with that in mind, a few of the functions, I'll go deeper on the doorbell because I know that was number one by a long shot. Some means by which our mediators and arbitrators can digitally tap on the door and say to folks in the plaintiff's room or the defense room, I'm on my way back in. It doesn't happen too often, but of course what goes on in caucus is entirely confidential. So if the defense counsel is in there saying, well, our real number is XYZ, and the mediator goes in and overhears whatever they're not meant to overhear, we're into all sorts of ethical problems, and doesn't happen daily. I think it's happened, when it does happen, it scares the bejesus out of everybody, and the idea that confidentiality is in any way encroached upon scares we're talking lawsuits and all sorts of problems. So the digital doorbell is more than an aesthetic nicety. I think it's something that will be very widely appreciated so that counsel and mediators and arbitrators can avoid those sorts of sticky scenarios. I dare say it's not exclusive to the legal sector. There must be other instances where what goes on in the breakout rooms should remain confidential, and people shouldn't be marching in between the rooms. So you've had some time, I think, to run that by, or perhaps run it by the development team. Are there any thoughts on that being an option that might be added in the coming months, Harry?
It's certainly on the list of to-dos, but the list of to-dos is a very long list. So
yeah.
So I can't, I wish I could be here today and say, hey, Darren, it's like, it's going to be part of, the X.Y release and in this time frame. I can't do that, but we've heard the ask, and it will be done. Just not sure of the time frame.
Okay, good.
But we are doing, that being said, sort of when it comes to breakout rooms, we are doing a lot of upgrades over the next couple of months on both the breakout rooms and the chat platform.
Right.
So, and I think you'll hear a lot about that in a couple of weeks at Zoomtopia, where we'll be actually demonstrating and telling you about it. It won't be GA then, because typically what we do at our annual user conference is talk about the things that are coming down the path.
Good.
With more clarity and more definitiveness.
Wonderful. Now, Don, I think Don in Texas, one of our more IT savvy members in the whole academy. Don, you wrote a blog yesterday. I think there was an update this week regarding breakout rooms and the ability for parties to potentially move between rooms of their own volition, which sounds like a bad idea to me in terms of our industry, but give us some thoughts on the changes this week, Don.
Sure. Well, a couple of changes that Zoom's making. Thank you, Harry. You've saved a lot of our mediations. I'm back to 60-40, but you've gotten a lot of, done over 75 all Zoom. The feature, one I like where you can move the tiles around so we can see in a large group who we're talking to and rearrange, not just who lit up last, but arrange them in order that makes sense for us for eye contact, if nothing else. The feature this week where the people can be free agents and move around only if the host allows, and don't want to scare our colleagues that you have to allow people to be able to move around in order for it to happen. So it's not like we're going to have miniature versions of Zoom bombing within the mediations. We have to allow it. But Harry, that is a wonderful, as I said yesterday, a half of a great idea. Because consider like a mediation that might have 36 people, and it almost would be nice to have a parent-child relationship within some of the breakout rooms where if, say, a subcontractor, and I know you come from the accounting world too, but if there's 9 subcontractors on a building project, And even within the subcontracting cluster, there's an insurance fight between the insurance is appointed a counsel to represent the principal, but they might also have personal counsel for the party that's trying to get their insurance coverage improved. And then what does that draw? It draws the insurance company putting separate counsel on it to defend those coverage claims. If we had a parent-child relationship, ABC subcontractor could have both their principals, their attorneys, and the counsel that would be fighting the insurance question, sort of in the child relationship. And if they could roam around within their parent-child relationship, but also have the ability to break out to talk about things they can't talk to together, it would just be a marvelous improvement. And I'm hoping it would be just a repurpose of your existing code where you could just tree out or tier the breakout relationships, and then you could have the best of both worlds. You could allow them to roam, but you could not have warring spouses be able to run into the other room and either screen share chat or tell somebody off because they can go into the other side. And I suggest the alternative yesterday might be to, like your code that allows for co-host, maybe some participants could be allowed to roam and others not. And to do it, that might be an easier fix, to do it on an individual participant basis when we admit them from the waiting room. Anyway, thank you all for what you've done for all of us.
Yeah, so Don, thanks for the feedback and your support. So if you just want to, I'm going to pop into the chat my email address. So people, if they have suggestions, then
I think we're going to get a lot of questions, Harry, from the viewers. So we'll also compile a lot of those and break down any incremental questions to add to our list. Just in case, because you've not got enough to do with the doorbell and everything else.
No, yeah, but you know what I'll do is I'll send them into a product. But at the same token, if people want some help from a Zoom perspective or have challenges, that's my email address. Please feel free.
Wonderful, great.
Yeah, the other thing, just for fun, actually, to create some fun when you're taking your coffee breaks during the day, like you should, because it's mentally healthy to do that, by the way, is go check out not on zoom.us, on zoom.com. Because there you will, on zoom.com, because there you will see all of the amazing use cases for Zoom that people have used it for, from birthdays to Juilliard School to opera singers, etc. So it's very cool.
Wonderful. Just more generally, Harry, in terms of the breakout rooms, one of the things that we like, I mean, mediators typically have, back in the real world, pre-March, will have a boardroom and 2 or 3 smaller caucus rooms. So some means by which we can set a default within our Zoom settings to simply recreate that as the default for every mediation we do. I think the norm is that members will start a mediation, go to the breakout room tool, set a name, a few rooms. I think, bearing in mind that the majority of our members are not techies or Luddites is not the word, but not technically enthusiastic is accurate. So if there was some means to simply log into the Zoom account settings and say, at the start of every day, I want a boardroom, I want a room for plaintiff, defense, sidebar. Those 4 rooms are the default for every new meeting. Some easy user interface to allow that to be the default for our working days, I think would save a lot of unnecessary administration. Some of our members doing insurance cases will do 2, perhaps 3 cases a day. So it's a bit of a rigmarole to sort of have to reset that standard each time. If it could be plugged into a default within the account settings, I think that would make life a lot easier for our members.
Got it. Okay.
Simeon, you mentioned you had a question.
Yes, I was just sort of picking up on what Don had said. I mean, in a wish list scenario, it would be amazing if we could have the capacity also for people in breakout room A to maybe, say you have multiple parties, 5, 10 parties in 5 different or 10 different breakout room groups. Maybe they want to merge. Maybe they want to form their own breakout room where they can caucus. Maybe you can create a caucus of, say, 3 subcontractors in Don's example of the construction matter. Could people have that capacity to be able to merge breakout rooms, to divide breakout rooms? And similarly, can we have chats between breakout rooms, chats from people in the main session going into breakout rooms or among the breakout rooms? Can we also have chats where you could have people within a single breakout room chat with several people rather than only a single person or everyone? And similarly for the main session, can we expand the chat functionality and similarly the document sharing functionalities as well along similar lines?
Part of the challenge with doing things like this, Simeon, is that things become very complex very quickly, and people then sort of shy away from using chat because I'm not sure where the chat's going, who can see the chat. So, it gets, it's not that it can't be done, but it can get very and it's like, how do you explain to people, this chat message stays in this breakout room. This chat message is being shared between this breakout room and these 2 rooms. This chat message is being shared between this room and the master room. It's like, how do you explain all sort of without having big pick lists, and then it becomes really, sort of very challenging.
I would say, I think, most of our members here, I've heard from many members, they're using good old texting. So if you're, texting, you can't go wrong with that. It's George, you're texting his cell phone. So I think that's the workaround outside of the Zoom box that most of the members are utilizing in recent months.
Right, we use actually 3 systems. We have emails, text, actually the cell phones, all going at the same time. But if you use a color icon system, maybe that would be a way of differentiating it easily for people.
Mm-hmm.
Harry, there's an issue that Darren and I had spoken about this briefly before, and this has nothing to do with the adding of additional functions. What happens to us in terms of hosting meetings is that we become the IT professional for all the people that we're dealing with. Yeah. So we're dealing with people that I'm on a PC. What I see on my PC, by the way, is not identical apparently to what a guest will see, because I don't have an ask for help button. I know it's there. I can tell people if I've got them in a conference or in a breakout room that they can bring me back to the breakout room. If they ask me where the button is, all I can tell them is look on your screen and it's there. I'm also sometimes dealing with people that are on a tablet or an iPhone. Their controls are different than the ones that I have. And in fact, if they're on an iPhone, if you're not aware of it, we don't necessarily know as the user that they've got to hit the screen in order to get any controls pulled up. So one of the things that becomes very difficult is to walk people through the existing functionality of the system and help them in terms of, they're stumped. We know the system can do something. We need to tell them how to do it. And if we don't know their system, I have played with the iPhone, with the tablet, and with the PC. I don't know anything about a Mac. I don't know anything about the Android system. Your technical support people obviously have that information. I don't know if there's the ability to generate some kind of a database for hosts so that we can go to it and say, all right, if we're trying to direct the people to this function and they're on an iOS, if I've got a PowerPoint where I can click on iOS, get a picture of that screen, lead them through the various commands, it would help me. At some point, we start serving the same technical function that your people serve, but we've got to do it on the fly while we're there. And if it's there, I haven't found it yet, but it would be real nice if there was a resource available so that the variations between operating systems and platforms that are utilizing Zoom, if I could see what they're seeing so that I've got the ability to walk them through whatever the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got a suggestion. I've been putting out pre-mediation, pre-arbitration, a written instruction to all the participants, trying to answer many of those questions, and referring to Zoom's support site and other YouTube sites they can go to answer some of those questions depending on what device they're using. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just a matter of you're going to need IT support yourself. So I outsource all my IT support to answer many of those questions for me that I put in these pre-mediation memos that I'll send out with my Zoom invite, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if this makes sense in the mediation context, but in the arbitrations I do, we always have a tech prep session the week before the actual arbitration. So we usually don't have the witnesses on. We have all the lawyers, all the arbitrators. I am fortunate, I guess. We usually do have a technical facilitator, whether it's the court reporter or some other organization that's assisting us. So I don't have to deal with the tech, but it is an opportunity to make sure that everybody has equipment that works, knows how to work it, and we work through everything in advance. And for larger mediations, I would think that would be appropriate as well.
At an initial stage, when I'm sending out Zoom information, one of the things that I do in terms of the general information that I'm sending out, I've given them the Zoom information and I let them know, because I know some of these people have never used it before. They're going to be intimidated. The meeting starts at 9 o'clock. They're wondering if it's going to work. I invite them to click on the link. I let them know they're only going to get as far as the waiting room because the session hasn't opened, that it'll give them the opportunity to make sure that they have the software downloaded. It increases their comfort level. I know that they use that frequently because I get messages every time somebody's logging in and they're logging into a session that isn't going to happen for another 2 weeks. But it takes out a huge amount of the intimidation factor. And I generally don't have problems with people logging in. People that are not familiar with the system take advantage of that invitation. But nonetheless, if somebody says to me, how do I call you back into a session? I need to be able to have a quick answer for them. And I can.
We might be able to sort of, I think we can probably crowdsource a solution to this. I mean, we'll get, I'm getting an email blast out to the members tomorrow. If you've got some of these how-to YouTube videos, then send them to me and I'll get them out to the entire community.
I'll tell you, I started doing this in my pre-mediation calls. To me, it's another reason to do pre-mediation calls if you don't already do them, but I always do anyway. And I do them all now on Zoom so that the attorneys, without having to admit that they're uncomfortable with it, have to get on it and play with it just amongst us without their clients or the adjusters around. And it gives them a comfortable place, and we can still have a get to know you session. So when we come back for the mediation in a few weeks or whatever it is, they've seen my face, they've seen each other, they've played with the platform, and they can be experts to their clients. So it is a trial run that's built into the process of how we do what we do anyway.
I would ask, are there any more questions from our panelists regarding Zoom, the infrastructure, lovely things to come down the pipeline, wish lists and so on? Now's your chance, because we've got Harry for 5 minutes, perhaps more, and then he's got to run.
One more on calendar history.
Mm-hmm.
Harry, I don't know if it's possible, but when we're looking back and trying to remember, when did I do that mediation? Or, wouldn't it be good to see over the year all the different mediations we did? When you go into the settings zone, it'd be great if there was a way to look at all, still have recorded there all the mediations, and for the wish list, if it could show all the participants on top of it, grouped within each of those sessions, that would be a tremendous benefit.
Yeah, the other thing.
There's a tab for that.
Is there?
For previous, yeah. Under your meetings.
Go back that far, Lee.
Oh, I don't know how far back it goes.
I'm not sure, Lee, if you're talking about the dashboard. The dashboard goes back for a couple of years, so it's pretty significant. But I would have thought, Simeon, that you're maintaining everything in your own calendar, either Google or Outlook or something.
Of course we are, Harry.
Yeah.
We are, and but there are times where, because we've grown so Zoom dependent, which I'm sure some of you would love people to be, having that kind of a calendar capacity would really be great.
The other thing is perhaps there's a way to do it, but is there any way? It seems like where the faces appear on the screen is quite random. And it would be really nice to be able to rearrange them so that each team is together with its own people. I can do that. So I just have to figure out how. Okay, good, because that's an important feature.
Yeah, I urge people to sort of update to the current release, 5.2.3, and with that you can move the tiles around, you can prioritize, you can, lots of great things. Yeah.
Good.
Do it now, Edna. Grab somebody and move them.
Oh, you're right. Here we go. All right, let me go to full screen. Let me
We'll lose you from the call. Don't push it now. Wait an hour.
All right, I'm going to wait. I'll do it later.
You don't need to go to full screen.
Well, again, Harry, I think you'll likely be parachuted into your next meeting in another part of the world, as Simeon's cat makes a cameo. And again, thank you for making the time to join us, and thank you for listening. I'm happy that my bombardment of emails the last few months have resulted in our having some time to meet each other, and you can learn from our industry, hopefully, as to what we think is missing from an otherwise excellent platform.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate everything. Next up is actually the dog walk. So
good for you.
Much more fun.
Much fun.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, really. Thank you for all of us for saving us being able to work.
Thank you for doing what you guys do. It's like you're solving problems for people every day, and I've been through mediation once in my life, and been there, done that, so I understand what you guys do, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for the support of Zoom.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, great. Thank you all. Bye bye.
All the best, Harry.
Cheers, guys.
Okay, so I think that was very productive. I'm glad Harry could join us. What I thought we would do, now we've got all the just the ADR folks in the room, let's talk about the last 6 months, because what a 6 months it's been. What I thought we would do is maybe, let's do it alphabetically, because we've so many moving parts. So Simeon, 2-3 minutes. The last 6 months, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the expectation, as I mentioned to Susan at the top of this, the expectation was that, yeah, you can do mediations by Zoom, but not proper mediation, not with attending counsel, not with an angry adjuster, all of the usual day-to-day. And here we are 6 months later, and Susan was right, I was wrong, we were all wrong. And now, is it quite as effective? I think the consensus is no, but again, we're not at the 10,000 hour mark. We're not veterans of this platform. We all know how to turn the computer on and get the faces on the screen. That doesn't mean we know how to fly the plane, and safely land it. I mean, we're not experts yet. There's only 1 or 2 folks that are at the 10,000 hour mark, which I think brings a degree of you're a veteran once you're at the 10,000 hour mark. So given that we're all at the couple of 100 hours mark or 1,000, how have you found the last 6 months? What have been the surprises? Really as your role as neutrals, not the reaction of clients. I'm going to get to the client stuff in the latter half of this because I've got a survey that might prove interesting. Simeon, floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you very much, Darren. Well, I have to say, I was among the people, maybe most of us mediators are very sensitive to human interaction and the importance of presence. And so I was among the people who thought, oh my God, what are we going to do when COVID lockdown hit? And I was amazed within the first month of COVID lockdown back in March into April, we scheduled about 13 Zoom mediations. And it was amazing. It proved to be very, surprisingly effective. There were some benefits. We get to see everybody on the screen all at once, full face. You can't really do that when you're in a room with people around the table. You do, but you don't get the same angles. We're getting full face. I think, there were certain features and challenges in Zoom. I think we talked about it a little bit already, but Zoom is another party in the room. So when we get a chance, we get the opportunity. Initially, we had to woo the lawyers onto Zoom. We'd start out with a telephone conference. We would have sent them the Zoom link, or initially we sent them a Zoom link during the conference, and then we'd get them on the conference. After about a month or two, people were just going right onto Zoom conferences. When we do our pre-mediation call scheduling now, it's a Zoom conference, and people get on. The ability to show lawyers how to use the Zoom mechanism is a way to make friends. And you know, just as COVID has been an opportunity for us to get human, you know, with the cats and the dogs and the kids and the food and, you know, the more casual attire, and the whole way we're in so many ways becoming more human as people come and go through our screens. So too, showing that I personally am a tech, moron, and that I'm struggling, you know, going through this process along with them, was a wonderful way to both to link and also to help people feel comfortable. And it morphed then into pre-mediation sessions with clients too. So we've had pre-mediation calls, and those morph into actual pre-mediation caucuses. We move from the technology into the process and the substance. And so that by the time we get into our, you know, formal joint session, we're finding many times there's a whole set of understanding that's been developing in advance of the mediation session. From the mediation session on, one of the things that we've been seeing is, you know, it used to be, I'm like, I try to be gentle, but we'll go for as long as it takes. So I'll work until in the wee hours of the morning. There is an element of Zoom burnout. And I think it comes from this. We're always looking at the screen. There's the light of the screen. There's the focus that's a little bit more intense than the focus in a room. In a room, you look around, you know, you walk, you do other things. And if I try to walk around, I'll disappear from my screen. So there are a few things, or going into breakout rooms. It was stunning to find where I used to at least have a minute or two to think between one breakout room and the next.
Right.
Now, boom, you know, I'm there in a second. And the initially for the mediator, it was kind of surprisingly stressful. I usually have, fortunately, infinite endurance, but I was finding myself dragging a little bit from this kind of intensity. So we do have to find ways. I've now, you know, we always have extra breakout rooms. You know, we don't just do, you know, for all the groups, we have, you know, for the, just in case we want lawyer, or principal, and private ones, or I have one for me. So I jump into the private breakout room so that I don't get caught in the main session while I'm getting a drink, or you know. So I don't want to take too much time, but I'll just say that I think there have been some very interesting, tricky things. The mute button. A problem with Zoom is that the loudest person speaks. And I had one mediation. We put people into a joint session. And one of the groups didn't want a joint session, another group did. We had an aggressive guy, we'll call him the competitor. We had another guy, we'll call him the avoider. They didn't want to talk too much. The competitor began in the joint session speaking when it was the avoider's turn, and he was representing a large group with several different counsel, et cetera. But when his lawyer started talking, the aggressor was offended that the avoider wasn't talking himself and started talking over the lawyer. If we'd been in a room, I would have quietly intervened. I would have moved my hand. I might have gotten up from my chair in a very nice way. I might have asked people if they want some Danish, you know, but there was no way to do that with a little green line around the box. Yeah. And the loud aggressor's voice beat my voice. So I finally muted the guy. And so we have the mute button. There's a bunch, I don't want to take too much time, but there's all kinds of stories.
But it underlines that we've got to find ways to make this new medium work for us with characterful, you know, colorful characters in mediation. So I'll get to some of that later with the results of our survey. Lee J, unmute, there we go. How's it been for you the last 6 months?
So I'm having fun with it. I've actually been using this kind of technology for ages. I've had, you know, people in China on WeChat and people in the UAE on Skype and all of that for years. So but I haven't done it exclusively like this before COVID. I'm going to assume that most listening and watching have seen the soft underbelly video that I did about how to connect with people more personally. So I thought that if it's okay, Darren, I'd love to talk about a couple of the updates and techie things that I'm having fun with as I do the mediations.
Sure.
One, when you've got a lot of people like we do here in a large mediation, you're doing a joint session, The newest version, make sure you're updated. I know Susan's put that in the chat too. The newest version allows you to take the default that's 5 tiles by 5 tiles in gallery view and change it to 7 by 7. So you get 49 people on the screen at once instead of just 25. So if you're dealing with a lot of parties, that's really helpful. Spend some time with the options. I mean, just go down. They're 3 feet long on the screen. There's so many options in the new version, and you'd be shocked at some of the things it does, like moving the tiles around. One of the things that I find I'm having a lot of fun with, and I've mentioned this before, is if everybody wants to experiment with me for a moment, mouse over Darren's picture, and in the top right corner, you see that blue box with 3 little white dots. If you click that box, the third option down is pin video. And what that does is it makes Darren's face the center of the screen, but you can still see everybody else in the gallery up above if you want to. But when you're asking a really important or sensitive question, which we do all day in mediations, right? I want to watch Darren's micro expression, and I want to see what his face looks like for that split second before he composes himself to answer the question. So if I say, Darren, tell us about your new pup. We're going to see, did you see it? Wait, did you see it? Did you see it? His face did 2 different quick things before he smiled and was on to answer the question. Those are the things. And now in the top left corner, you can click unpin video. That defaults you back into speaker view. You have to go to the top right corner to go back to gallery view. But I find in breakout rooms especially, where we're going to get candid responses from people, I pin the video of the person whose reaction I really want to see, and I look for that micro expression that tells me how they feel about the question before they put on the face of the stranger or whatever to answer it. I also liked that a couple of people have said, we get to look at people in a way we don't normally get to in a room. We get to stare at them, and they can't see when you're pinning their video. So either in the gallery view or in the pinning the video view, we can stare at them in a way that's socially inappropriate if we were in person. And I think that's an advantage we have to use for ourselves. Another thought is talking about the mediator's break and how do you, Simeon was talking about how do you get a cup of coffee and all of that. I use the main room. When everybody's in breakout rooms, that main room's empty. I go back to the main room between breakouts and I stop for a minute and I change my tone for who I'm about to go in and talk to, and I think about what are the first couple of questions I want to ask them or how I want to present the offer when I go in there. And I take 30 or 60 seconds in that main room before I jump to the other breakout. I never go from breakout 1 to breakout 2 unless we're really going fast with numbers and it's just that. And the last thing is I just wanted to emphasize how this has changed our world as mediators. Thomas Friedman said the world is flat, and I think our mediation world is flat right now. I got a call from a retired judge who's now practicing law again up in Santa Barbara, who said, I've got this kind of a case. These are the things that are at stake. These are the personalities involved. I'm putting your name on the list, Lee J. I need 3 others. Who else would you recommend? Again, the mediation was taking place in Santa Barbara, but I asked him, and he said virtually by Zoom. I gave him 1 person in Woodland Hills, 1 in Austin, Texas, and 1 in Tampa, Florida, because why not? Those were the 3 people for that case that I thought were best suited. So our network through NADN and the people that you've met at the conferences and things who are scattered all about are fair game, because if we're Zooming, we can Zoom from anywhere. The only thing we give up, I think, is they don't know the local judge perhaps, but I think that's the smallest sliver of what we do. And I think finding the right mediator with the right skill set for a particular case, regardless of where they're located, opens up a whole world to us. And I think, frankly, gives Nadn as an organization a whole lot more leverage in our lives, in our world. So those are the thoughts, those are the things I'm having fun playing with. And I just encourage everybody to go click the options tag, give yourself 20, 30 minutes and just take your time to go down and see all the things this does. Because you can move tiles around, you can do everything and make it more yours than I think we're used to from the earlier versions. So that's my 2 cents.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lee J. Judge Fields, Ken, in Arizona. you've been again you something of a veteran. I think you've used the various systems before most of the rest of us in March. But how have cases been? How has your role as a mediator or arbitrator been?
My business has increased actually, and I was going to say I retired from the bench in Superior Court in Arizona in 2007. I'd been given the opportunity to set up a paperless court, so I became an advocate for digitization of the dispute resolution process. So I've had a virtual office since 2007, and I have an arbitration mediation practice. But I felt like I was beating my head against the wall trying to convince the bar users, clients, to do something online other than just email me their memos. So I was asked in December or so of 2019 to set up some training on this. So we set up a Zoom mediation. We got a waiver of privacy from the parties. So I did some training in early February on how to do a Zoom mediation with help from Lynn Cole down in Tampa, Florida, who has been using Zoom. The feedback I got from about 100 or so participants, well, it's a nice toy, yeah, blah, 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 blah. Well, a week later, my phone was going crazy. I was getting emails, can we do something else? And then Nadn and Susan stepped in. Thank God for the help there. So it's been fantastic. But what I've observed in this increasing business is this is synergistic. I've used a few platforms other than Zoom, but with using Zoom, it's synergistic. The lawyers, the clients, are really picking up on it rapidly. I don't have to spend as much time with Zoom training now on how to use this. I found it amazing. I had one the other day where it was 5 members of a family in a family business on one side. One of the siblings was in a large conference room with all the lawyers. The rest of them all over the country. The oldest was 90 years old in an assisted living place. I found it was more effective to talk to her because she was on her own Zoom and we were having face-to-face conversation. If we were in a conference room with these family on one side, she could have been in the background, been dominated. I find this is very highly effective and I don't think it's going to change. And my thought is, my recommendation, and I'm finding, get a local support group. Barry Schneider, who's also an NADN member. And there are 3 or 4 of us that share what we've just learned when we finished a Zoom mediation. And find an adventurous group of 3 or 4 people that are willing to try new things. And it raises that flat effect that Lee J just talked about. The world, we're limited by our imagination, by our, I should say, our lack of imagination. We're not going back. Thank God for that. And I think the world's going to be great with Zoom. And thank you, by the way, Darren, for making this all available.
I had nothing better to do, and I looked forward to it for weeks. So let's go to Simon in Florida, a mandatory mediation state. Simon, mediation is your wheelhouse more than arbitrations and so on. How's the situation in Florida for you?
Actually, it's kind of interesting. I had my doubts about going through the process. What I'm finding as I go through it is that, quite frankly, my gut tells me that the advantages of this process are actually far outweighing the disadvantages. For example, in Florida is a mandatory mediation state. All decision makers are supposed to be at the mediation. One of the biggest jokes in Florida, because there's no way to do it, no way to enforce it, we're not in Florida permitted to even report to the court if the decision makers aren't there. So what traditionally was happening is we would have a mediation in which the court was supposedly forcing the parties to be there. Frequently, there would be motions to attend by phone or video, and the judges would routinely turn it down. As a result, we still ended up with coverage counsel attending instead of actual counsel. Instead of the decision makers being there, if we're dealing with an insurance company, that have a local independent adjuster show up who actually has no authority whatsoever. So part of what's happening is we're getting the real decision makers there. In preparation for today, I started to think about it. I can't remember the last case that I had. I've had instances in which counsel of record has somebody else in the firm covering it for them. I have not had a mediation since this started where an attorney from a different firm appeared. So I've got the decision makers there. I find that a lot more effective than what I'm getting in a face-to-face situation. It's interesting that everybody's talking about the burnout factor in terms of being in the screen. I'm finding just the contrary. What really burns people out is to sit in a caucus room with their attorney for 45 minutes while I'm in another room. And all they can think about is all the things I could be doing today that are constructive. And instead, I've got to sit here and pay my attorney at $350 or $550 an hour to sit and chit chat with me about the baseball game. Well, now all of a sudden, and these are people that buy into the process. So when I'm going into their room, they are there for me. But when I'm not in their room, they're returning an email, they're getting their lunch, they're doing all kinds of other things. And so what I'm finding is that people seem to be more patient on long sessions when I'm doing it by video because of the convenience during their downtime. They enjoy that a lot more. One more thing, and then I'll get to the next panel. We've talked about the gauging the body language, for example, of participants, the advantage of actually being there. Interestingly enough, I do find, and Lee, I wasn't aware of the pin function. I will use that because that helps too. But what I'm really finding is that I can read their body language and their facial expressions just about as well on Zoom as I can face-to-face. What I miss in a face-to-face is the ability to see my body language and my facial expressions. There are times in the course of a mediation where I want to be everybody's friend. I want a smile on my face. I want them to like me. There are other times in terms of dealing with other people that I need to be a little bit more stern as the neutral. I can gauge by looking at my mirror, I can gauge what I look like to them. And I think it makes me a little bit more effective in my presentation for me to be able to see what I look like. I happen to be a famous sloucher. I get comfortable in a chair. I tend to lean back a little bit. And if I'm in a face-to-face session, I might do that for 2 hours with not realizing it. I've straightened myself up several times during the course of our presentation today because I realized I was slouching. So I think that's something that's also very effective. A couple of local judges asked me when we started all of this, they wanted me to get back to them as to whether or not we think that once the COVID problem has passed, whether or not this is effective. And incidentally, my understanding is that the Florida Bar ADR Committee has made recommendations to the Supreme Court to alter the mediation rules, not to require video, but to permit it in all cases post-COVID. I've had some of the local judges say to me, Simon, get back to me when all this is done and let me know whether you think this works well or not. And quite frankly, I'm going to tell them I would rather deal with a CEO out of Ohio who can talk to me, whether it's in his office or at home. I would rather deal with him that way than to make him feel that he had to drag his tail down to Fort Myers, Florida. We don't have plane flights to anywhere from Fort Myers. Everything's a connection. It's a problem for them to get here. They come in with an attitude to begin with because they don't want to be there. I'm finding this to actually be a more effective method of presentation. And I do not perceive that my settlement rate has gone down at all. If anything, I think it may have increased slightly by utilizing this platform.
Wonderful. And I should say, just a programming note for our viewers, we were aiming to close about 4:30. Because this is all good stuff, we're going to keep going for another half hour, I think, beyond that. Anybody that can't stay for the whole thing, this will be on a private YouTube link in the next 24 hours. So, but try to stick around because I think this is worthwhile stuff. So let's go to John in Georgia. John Miles is the CEO of Miles Mediation, which is Georgia's largest premier ADR panel firm with expansion beyond his own state borders, which is very much in keeping with the new Zoom world and so on. John, how have things been in Georgia? What have you seen from reported back from your panelists?
Yeah, when Darren asked me to participate, I reminded him, I haven't mediated for 2 years. So I've never done a Zoom mediation. So Darren wisely suggested that I talk to some of my panelists. To give you an idea, so we have 52 people across 4 offices. And of that 52, 16 of those do 10 or more mediations a month. Or arbitrations, but that's kind of the mix. So in talking to those that did it full time, one what I heard was kind of what's already been echoed. We closed our Atlanta office down March 23rd, and then we didn't do anything. Everything was Zoom. Some of our older panelists I talked with struggled, candidly, with the technology. Some of the younger folks were able to adapt quickly. And what I found, though, was it really wasn't as much an age thing as I looked at the numbers. If we use key performance indicators to evaluate our folks, and it seemed like the cases that were under 200,000, whether they be personal injury or corporate, adapted very quickly to Zoom. And those neutrals saw, Simon had mentioned, actually an increase. Those who are doing cases that were 7-figure almost dried up entirely. Talking to our case managers, what we found there in March and April and into May was clients said, well, we really need to be in person, so we'll reschedule. We'll kick the can down the road. I can tell you that I'm in our Atlanta office right now. We'll do 40 mediations this week. 10 of those will be in person. We have 3 in person now. All of those are larger matters. Now, in our Savannah office, we never missed a beat. Savannah never really stopped doing in-person mediations. They've done very little Zoom. Charlotte has been a little bit of a mix, but more Zoom. But I can tell you that looking at the numbers, as of September, all of our, what I call our elite or high-end folks are right back to where they were before the pandemic. So that segment of the audience, and Darren, I guess you're going to touch on the customer piece of this, yeah, have clearly said, they said one of two things. Either Zoom is awesome, and this is the new normal going on into forever, or they have said, we don't see that this being over anytime soon, so we will use Zoom. I can tell you that at least on the high end, my experience looking at the data, at first Zoom was not as effective. We did not resolve as many with Zoom. That trend line has come back up, especially with some of the larger cases. So that's kind of where we are. You guys on this panel have had amazing insights about that. I'm going to encourage all my guys, if they're not on right now, to watch.
We'll get the YouTube link out tomorrow at some point for everybody to catch up. So in terms of the settlement rate, with the wealth of data you have from all your panelists, you'll see the settlement rate is back in the good old days of 2019.
Yeah, it's coming back. There was quite a disparity from April, May, June, and July. I don't know how Georgia is compared to the states, but Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, where we have our offices, everything was right now. Like I said today, half of our bookings have been in person as of the time I checked before I came on. So June 1st, everything was coming all the way back in person. Then we had a spike in Georgia, and then everything went right back to Zoom. Now we're kind of trending back more to the in-person, but that's much more on the high end of the market. Right. At least that's been the experience of my neutrals.
Good. Okay. Thanks, John. Doug, out in California, I hope that you'll know these wildfires have disappeared. We spoke a week ago and it was looking a bit hairy. I hope things are better in your neck of the woods, I hope.
Well, the fire came within about 8 miles of my house, and if you saw me picking up the phone, it was the sheriff's department calling saying the evacuation warning has been lifted here. So I think we're okay. Good.
Wonderful. Glad to hear. Doug, a lot of your cases, in terms of your training and so on, but your mediations and arbitrations, you, of course, for the members that don't know, literally wrote the book on de-escalation. So in terms of, I was going to ask you particularly, your mediations or arbitrations, are you finding some of your affect labeling and so on, does that translate online as well for you? I mean, are you finding any difference? Some of the tricks of the trade you're using in real life, do they translate online as effectively?
Answer yes, and it's actually a lot easier.
Okay.
For the reasons that we've been talking about, where you're seeing people looking into a camera. I get all the visual data I need to be able to listen to the tone of voice and look at their facial expressions and immediately understand what they're experiencing. And if they do get escalated, it's very easy right there to calm them down, and nobody gets in the way. So I have found that I hope I never have to do another. I know I have to do an in-person mediation at the end of October, but I hope I never have to do another in-person mediation.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I do not want to do any more in-person mediations. I much prefer this platform. And
so I can put you down as our first on the record convert. Susan, you send you a gold star or some award.
I've had nothing but success in both. I did a complex multi-party mediation that would normally take 12 hours. I did it in 4. I've had a complex arbitration that we were scheduled for 3 days. We did it in 1 day. I mean, the efficiencies of this system for me have been astounding. And I'm just not, and I live in the mountains. So for me to go anywhere is a bit of a drive. I'm super happy, and I've got a high-speed internet here. I've got a fiber optic to my door. So
yes, yeah.
I'm super happy just sitting here, working from here and helping people on Zoom. And if this is what the rest of my career is going to be, I'm very happy with it.
And Doug, what others may not realize on this call is that those of us in California, when we meet in person, we have masks on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're masking and distancing when we're in person. You can't get any data from that.
Yes. Yeah, that has come up before. I mean, you're really going to get that much more in person when the person sat 6 feet away with a mask covering everything. I mean, good luck with that.
Right. And talking to people, being able to, really listen to them and understand what they're experiencing is very, very difficult.
Mm.
But with Zoom, I love this platform. I've had no problems with it.
Fantastic. Susan in Texas, Susan Perin. How are you, Susan?
Yes.
Now, Susan, your practice is not so much insurance mediation. So you're handling, as is Edna, complex arbitrations for the most part. So how have you found, with so many more moving parts than the average mediation, how have you found these major cases with multiple parties and so on?
So I found it great. I do actually mediation and arbitration exclusively, but I'll just focus on my comments for some arbitration because I've heard a lot of people talking about mediation.
Sure.
I saw a notice recently that Harris County on October 1st is going to start jury trials, and the jurors are going to be picked in NRG Stadium where they play football. So the courts haven't been able to really resolve any cases or try any cases, but as arbitrators, we are so busy. Since March, I've tried as an arbitrator a consumer case, a commercial case, a current 2-week construction case with a panel, and a coming up 2-week construction case with a panel. So we tell everyone as attorneys and as arbitrators, if you want something postponed, arbitrators are setting cases probably like at least 9 months out or so. So I'm really proud of, thank you and thank Zoom, because we've been able to handle and conclude cases, whereas even the courts can't do it in the same way. I agree with Edna on what she talked about. Some just practical ideas I want to try to give people on arbitration is that practice, practice, practice. On the big cases, we have had that practice session on Zoom ahead of time with attorneys, arbitrators, and sometimes witnesses also, because that's so important. In the last case, we spent an hour on the practice session working out all the technology bugs. So when we started the arbitration, the next day, we went straight to, attorney status, comments, opening statements. We didn't waste time on trying to handle the technology part. We have a master chair who's basically handled the breakout rooms alone. We have breakout rooms. We have waiting rooms for witnesses. We make sure that the attorneys know who's going to testify the next day and in what order. We have them have their witnesses there ahead in a waiting room so that when that witness is called, we're not wasting any time on waiting for that witness. We have on the exhibits we've had as arbitrators, we've had the attorneys send us the binders exhibits ahead of time so that if we want the paper exhibits, we get them mailed to us ahead. On screen share, we tell attorneys I heard on a seminar once that we as arbitrators aren't fooling with sharing the screen. We suggest that the attorneys get a technical company to help them with that, or they're responsible for doing the screen share themselves. Right. You know, you wonder how if attorneys will accept arbitration. I have some coming up in December. And when I had a status conference with them, I said, we can wait and see what the numbers are like to see if we're going to do it in person, or we can just say we're going to do it, because I doubt it, or we can say we're going to do it virtual now. Both of them said, let's do it. Let's set it for virtual now. Mm-hmm. So just a few practical things, two main observations from our arbitrations. The credibility of the witnesses, some attorneys are afraid to try cases because on the screen, because they think we won't be able to judge the witnesses as well. I think, like some have said, we can judge them better sometimes because we're looking straight at them. And as judges, when the judges in the courtroom, they have to look at witnesses from the side. So the judges I've been on panels with have said it's really helpful to be on the screen. But the other thing that has amazed me is I've heard a lot of talk from attorneys and arbitrators about thinking it would be less efficient. We think, people that I've served with and people that have done arbitrations, I think it's a lot more efficient. When we have arbitrations in person and we take a break, our 10-minute break sometimes turns into a 15 or a 20-minute break. With the Zoom, it is, except for a few rare circumstances, it is like clockwork. We have taken 10, 15-minute break in the morning, 45 minutes, hour break at lunch, and 1 or 2 breaks in the afternoon. We've been working from 9 to 5, 5:30 or 6. And it's incredible to me how efficient it has been. Mm-hmm. I think that we have much less wasted time than a case in person. And that has really amazed me. One thing everybody, all of us as arbitrators and as witnesses and as attorneys have to be careful about, just practical things I've noticed. I notice when people are looking down, and I don't know if they're looking at an exhibit, if they're working, or if they're using their iPhone to text somebody. So I'd be careful about looking down. I served on a jury for 10 days too, and jurors notice these things. You know, some people have looked bored. Be careful about not looking bored. You have to try to, look engaged the whole time. And whispering, when people whisper to each other, we can hear what that is. So we tell people, be careful about whispering because it's magnified. And the other main thing is, and I'm talking fast now because we're so short on time, but the other main thing is when you're on Zoom and you're interacting, it's very easy to talk over someone because we think there's and we could have asked him, but we think there's like a slight delay. So we have to talk slower and be careful about, as attorneys, arbitrators, witnesses, whatever, be careful about not chiming in at the end of somebody's sentence because then we can't hear either person talking. So yes. Anyway, so I've been incredibly pleased with it, and I feel incredibly blessed to be able to have such an active, all of us, such an active practice when so many people can't do their work. So thank you.
Quite right. Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed, Susan. Don in Texas. Don, you're suitably beautiful background in the state of Texas there. How are you? Well, how's business been? I mean, you're something more of a pro going back before March, I think, but how have you found the art of mediation online in the last 6 months?
Just a couple of stats because we're short on time. Crash course. I was worried mainly about being able to read people and, the whole deal of Kennedy-Nixon debates and the context matters. And Doug's taught me that well over 15 years. And so I tried, and Doug, you'll be happy to know that I bought a Jumbotron so that I can magnify the micro expressions, as you call them, so that I can see. I also think the Zoom bombers did us a favor. When all of that came about and we needed to individually authenticate people, what'd that do? Gosh, it gave us a chance to say good morning to everybody individually and to have something to break the ice and to talk about other than the conflict they were there for. And so, the you're on mute or you should be on mute, that's become the catchphrase of the year, has broken a lot of ice, and people start to relate to us and take 3 deep breaths. I think Doug would say they need more like 15, but at least 3 deep breaths before they even get assigned into their caucus room. So that's been nice. As far as your question on business, this week I'll do 2, 2, and 1. 2 all in person, 2 all Zoom, and 1 hybrid. The settlement rates have been, I think, static. I track data, and I think the settlement rates have been constant across modes. And the ones that didn't settle wouldn't have settled if we were all crammed into a VW bug. And so it's more the case than the context. But as with anything, there's ups and downs and positives and negatives. I think it's here to stay. It's how we as practitioners work it into practice. Several of you commented that I love being able to get to the person who's actually making the decision. And they want to get out of, Zoom school or chasing the dog for a minute. So they're happy to log on and I can talk to the decision maker, and that's a feature, not a bug. And so I think it's here, and we just work it into our toolbox as another tool, another medium to, improve engagement in these contexts.
Wonderful. Thanks. Just to have a quick survey, the whole Zoom bombing thing, we remember hearing about this being the monster that was going to come and bite us all in the night 6 months ago. Has anybody here actually had an instance of somebody gate crashing a meeting? No. So tabloid nonsense, as I said 6 months, and Susan said as well 6 months ago. Edna in New York, who will embarrass a little further later in the meeting. Edna is the recipient of this year's Distinguished Neutral of the Year award, but we'll embarrass her formally in another 20 minutes or so. Edna, how, of course, your case is mostly large, complex international arbitrations and so on in New York and globally now, which doesn't involve jumping on a plane. How have you found the transition the last 6 months?
Yeah, I think Zoom has been a godsend for all of us, as was stated. The cases that I had in the spring, the May cases, nobody was really prepared to go forward virtually at that point with, really fairly significant cases. So those all got adjourned to the fall. Now the fall is unbelievably busy because we've got the cases that got adjourned plus the cases that were already scheduled. I've had several, I guess I've had 3 Zoom arbitrations and I think 6 more coming up before Christmas as things got backed up. I think it's been an incredibly useful and productive and effective mechanism. I think to the extent there's been resistance by counsel, counsel really feel like they need to see the witness face to face, so the force of their personality has the impact that they want, and they can't really get that in the same way. But from the arbitrator's perspective, which is what we're talking about, it works great. As everybody said, we can really see the witness even better than we could otherwise. But a few things that are practical that haven't been mentioned. I do sit here with 5 screens because I need one for the video and the sharing. I need one for the transcript, separate screen, because I always require having a live transcript so I can read that in case some audio fades out for a second or something like that. I've got 2 screens, so I've got the documents from each party. Maybe more if there's more than 2 parties. So I've got one for each of them because the screen share is very nice, but you only see what's being shown to you. And, if you were sitting in real life, you're going to be riffling through the exhibit to see what else is there. So I've got those 2 screens. And then you have to have another screen to have, private conversations with the other arbitrators if you want to send them a text or an email about something that's going on. So you've got 5 screens going on, which, as somebody said, for the things that die, you have to make sure you toggle them. So I make sure I put it on, like, don't ever go to sleep, right? So I don't have to worry about that. You learn things as you hear what issues other people have had. I have one case now where they seem very resistant. I'm in New York, so New York is actually quite good right now, but everybody remembers how bad it was. So it really is impacting people's willingness, both arbitrators and counsel, frankly, to get together. So we'll see how this last one goes. That's really pretty determined to meet in person, and I don't know how that's going to come out. Right. So we're working through it. I think in the future, we're going to see a lot more hybrid, certainly going to see a lot of, witnesses, who we've always taken virtually sometimes when they were remote. we're going to see a lot more of that. Arguments, one-day arguments are probably going to go remote. But I think our business will probably go back to in-person hearing for anything significant that's more than a day or two, because people are going to want that. So I found the breakout rooms very effective. At the beginning, we didn't trust them, and we would call separately on a phone to make sure that it was really secure. But as time went on, we really became comfortable with it. So the concern that we don't have a chance to interact in the same way is not really a problem, because we just go right into our breakout room for the breaks or for lunch and are able to communicate almost in the same way as before, because those are really quite trustworthy vehicles for us. So all in all, I think it's been a great success. It really has saved us, and I think the parties, because they're able to get resolution without waiting for what appears to be at least another year now. So I think it's really been very good for everybody, frankly.
Well, my first comment, if you've got 5 screens around you and these multiple computers, careful, because you're going to become the IT expert that everybody calls and emails. So we might delete that part from the YouTube video as a personal favor. Second thing, with so many moving parts, and the idea of parties calling her in from various continents and different time zones, are you, for the major cases, are you using a concierge service where somebody is sort of taking care of the parties going into umpteen different rooms?
Yeah, always. That is one of the issues that's come up with the international cases. The time zones are so varied. So, some of my cases really, I've got one coming up. We're going from New York time, 7 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. because we have people in London, we have people in Hong Kong, we have people in Korea, we have people in Singapore, people in New York, people, in the middle of the country. And, I've had several cases like that. So I didn't get my trip to Singapore and my trip to Bali, unfortunately, as a vacation, but it does enable us to keep functioning. So it does create shorter days, which has made us add Saturdays in many days to kind of add additional time. And the concierge service, absolutely. I'm finding a lot of my cases are using Arbitration Place, which is in Toronto. I think they're a little, they charge for their service, but they're incredible. They will even send the equipment to you. So I thought in one case, I'm going to try them, have them send the equipment. So you feel like, it's like a spy thing. You feel like 007. These big black things arrive with the monitor and the computer and the camera and the earphones and all of that. So that was quite cool, but it turned out it was the same equipment I already had. So I only used it for that one case, but they will spend as much time as required with each arbitrator, with each witness, to make sure that they have the equipment they need, that they're able to use it appropriately, that they can get the bottom screen and the top screen to be in the right place. And, so you're not looking up because the wrong thing is on the top screen as opposed to the bottom screen, for example. So yes, that's very common, but there's always some kind of concierge, or to the court reporter. If you're not using Arbitration Place, there's somebody that handles all the technical aspects for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Edna. Howard in Tennessee, former president of the International Academy of Mediators. We've spoken on the phone for 12, 13 years, and this is our first time meeting in person. So lovely to virtually meet you, Howard. How have things been in Tennessee in terms of the transition to online mediation arbitration?
Darren, some of the older lawyers participating in this session this afternoon will vividly recall all of the discussions about the vanishing trial. And then in the first quarter of this year, we were confronting the possibility of the vanishing mediation. Pretty scary. So the arrival of video conferencing in a really robust way, and I put Zoom at the top of anybody's list, was certainly of great help. It was just a matter of trying to amend the culture for the lawyers in our state to accommodate this particular type of change. And some progress has been made. It crosses generations as to the resistance. The millennials, of course, have been living on their computer screens for quite some time, so it's a non-issue for them. But for the people who share this sort of hair color with me, it's a different proposition. My practice is mostly here, Chattanooga, and Nashville. And in the interim, first problem was helping my assistant explain to those who were calling to schedule mediations, do you want it all Zoom? Do you want it hybrid? Or do you want it in person? And then the manner in which those things are managed become another set of issues. It has promoted more use of pre-mediation telephone conferences, a very good thing. You accomplish several missions having that type of conversation. What I found early on was, and it was principally because of two firms, one in Atlanta and one in Nashville, they actually required for our remote participation mediations that I not use breakout rooms on the Zoom platform. They were, was preferring another platform, which I won't mention, but the other one was good with Zoom, but wanted to do the communications in series. And there seems to be a continuing interest in that. So Zoom is still a good tool, but for some of my frequent flyers, they would rather do a series. It involves a few more clicks, but you re-engage. There is no issue about somebody sneaking into your room. And particularly the one yesterday, that's the way we did it. And they were completely happy with it. We use a text message. I use my iPhone as an independent link. I send them a text message saying, look for an invite, the fresh invite. In 2 or 3 minutes, it arrives. Once they get in the sync of it, they're happy to be using Zoom. Yesterday, the question emerged, our mediation yesterday only lasted 11 hours and 20 minutes. And so my question after we were about hour 8 or 9, do you think that that we're now more, the mediations are becoming longer? The claims person, the very nice lady with the money, said yes, because I'm sitting here in my house and I'm comfortable. So this is a different atmosphere and attitude. But for a lot of my older frequent flyers, the whole notion is, when can we get back to 3-dimensional justice instead of 2? And I get it. There are some advantages. Doug's made some fantastic points, Lee J too, about what you can really see and how you can use the technology to bring about a focus that you can't really accomplish person to person. But still, that being in the same room with them, it still remains better. But this is still good. It's still good. It's certainly worth using, and it is rescued. Where we go from here, country eventually got over the pandemic of 1917, 1918. I'm doing some volunteer work to help our Episcopal Diocese of East Tennessee restore the opportunity for people to return to churches. Once people feel comfortable returning to church, they're going to feel comfortable returning to in-person mediation. But it's just a process over time. I could go on and would be happy to. We do not have a temperature gauge to check everybody who comes into our office, but in Chattanooga, that is a popular thing. So you have to. That's my final point. In Tennessee, our metropolitan areas have been given the authority by our governor to set their own requirements as far as social distancing, mask use, size of gatherings, those sorts of things. So it differs in the major cities. So I may walk into Chattanooga with a certain expectation about an in-person compared to Knoxville or Nashville. Hybrid, I think, is where it's going to continue to go. And when you think about it, before the arrival of COVID, there was always this issue of, particularly the courts saying everybody's got to be there in person, but the insurance adjuster from Columbus, Ohio didn't want to make the trip. This now gives us the excuse to accommodate and overcome a problem we had pre-COVID. So
right.
That's my 2 cents.
Good. Ups and downs. And finally, in terms of our panelists, we go to Larry in Florida, Larry Watson. Larry is one of the founders and partners of Upchurch, Watson, White and Max, which is Florida's largest ADR firm. Larry, hope you're well. Give us the view from Florida. Sorry, Larry, you're muted. We've got to get one of the, you're muted. It wouldn't be a meeting of Zoom if we didn't get that in. There we go.
We're all learning. First, I'll say it's quite adventurous for you to suggest that 10 mediators of this caliber could basically talk shop for 2 minutes apiece. So,
it wasn't 2 minutes.
You can. We're not on the clock anymore, so it's more than 2 minutes.
I feel like a pair of brown shoes in a room full of tuxedos here. We just concluded a usage report in our firm. Since April the 1st through August 31, we did 1,788 video conference mediations. We're running about 357 a month, pretty much all Zoom, 1 or 2 other platforms, but all Zoom. my partner, Michelle Jernigan, has been doing a firm-wide survey of the mediators to sort of get a reaction to how they feel about it. And we're getting some interesting feedback. You know, obviously, as mentioned earlier, the mediators love it because they don't have to travel, not get in the car driving anywhere anymore. They basically lament a little loss of interpersonal relationships and communications. It's not quite the same as being face-to-face. We've touched on that. We're not seeing any noticeable difference in outcomes. There's no disadvantage we're seeing to the clients by participating in Zoom. The sense, though, that I'm getting, and a lot of our other mediators are getting, is that I think these settlements are coming out a little bit less than they did before we got into this kind of mediation. And I think probably the reason is, you know, plaintiff lawyers need cash flow, and they really don't have the court option anymore. So I think they're probably taking deals a little better. The issues we've had are technical, basically internet problems, getting used to manipulating, getting nimble and managing the process. We're struggling a little bit with getting deals documented using a combination of email or Adobe Fill and DocuSign. I've found that multi-party cases are taking a lot longer to get documented and signed and put together. It's a little more time consuming. I think, if I could be crass, I think carriers are holding the money a little longer and dragging out the process. I think we need to be a little bit more nimble in the way we manage that. We are using a lot of hybrid processes. I think Edna mentioned that, where we will have someone live in our conference room with one party and then two other parties on Zoom with a screen we have set up in there. And that's maybe a blend thing that's gonna keep on going. Screen sharing is a huge hit. Frankly, you see more with screen sharing when they put exhibits up than you would in a live mediation if they've got a PowerPoint on a distant screen or a chart up against the wall, and you can manipulate and go to it and highlight the words and everything a lot better. I'm having a little problem with it because the camera doesn't always capture the entourage players that are to the left and the right of the party I'm talking to. And there are these whispered conversations that are going on, and in a normal live mediation, I can turn around and look him right in the eye and, what did you say? Let's put that on the table. We're also just we have a statute that makes everything confidential. It applies to all participants in the mediation. We send out an engagement letter where the people that retain us sign an agreement agreeing that they're going to maintain confidentiality. And then we use sign-up sheets at the mediation to capture these entourage players that aren't necessarily the subject of an engagement letter. And we just want to make sure that the experts and the annuity people and so forth that show up, we don't have that ability to capture people on sign-up sheets, and that's getting to be a bit of an issue, I think. It's belt and suspenders, but we found that civility actually has improved. I think the video platform doesn't lend itself to theatrics, and I'm not seeing the chest thumping and the table pounding and the dramatic actions of a lot of the lawyers that we used to. All in all, our group just it's a game changer. It's not going to go back. This is the quote new normal. And I'm curious what Edna was saying about how it's getting into arbitration. I'm not real sure that I've done about 3 arbitrations now with it and blends of it. I'm not sure we're going back on that one either. I think that we need more work to get arbitration into this format a little better because of it's hard to cross-examine and it's hard to put in direct testimony and stuff like that. But the cost savings on it is enormous. So yeah, that's kind of how things are working.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Larry. So what I thought we would do just now is go to, because Susan is sitting there patiently at the 10,000 hour mark. And I've also want to introduce Simeon Baum from California, who's a legal technology expert. I didn't introduce him earlier. He does some work, Simon, I think, with legaler.com. Simon, can you hear me? You're muted. We're back to the catchphrase.
Yes. I've been in online dispute resolution for the past 10 years, and just to honor many familiar faces, especially from the Scheinman Institute at Cornell and out here in California. So just to honor to be here.
You're very welcome. So what I thought we'd do, just in terms of any questions, now I should say, Jean, you can unmute your microphone. Any accompanying thoughts to what has come up regards arbitration? Because you're a world-class arbitrator yourself, sir, and you've done a number of
Three quick points. Number one, and someone may have flashed this, get everyone's cell phone at the beginning of the Zoom call, and because you're going to have power outages. I've had 2 of them. Wow. And number 2, insofar as documenting the resolution, the settlement, you can sign and then on your iPhone, take a picture of the signature page, designate one person to be the scribe, send all signature pages to the scribe, make sure the scribe initials every page so there's no fooling around with pages, and you've got a signed settlement agreement. Even if a party's not familiar with the IT, it's readily done. I think it's, Edna, I think it's the wave of arbitration also. To save money, I think it's coming and it's going to be with us.
Wonderful. And I should say, Doug and I, or Lee J and I, spoke a few weeks ago. Some folks in California, they do things different out there, I'm told. I know that, Doug, I think you've recorded the end of the session and said, okay, here we all are in person. We're agreeing on X, Y, and Z. You've used the audio and video as proof of signature.
Right.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that it complies with our local Code of Civil Procedure,
right,
but I think a judge would be hard-pressed to say that people didn't agree to something when there's a video recording of everybody saying that they've agreed with it. And under California Evidence Code, a video is a writing. It's a document. So I hope it never gets tested, but I find that people really like the idea that we have a recorded video. And as soon as it's recorded, I send it out to counsel and say if there are any problems, get right back to me. So I think that works pretty well. And I think under California law, it's going to hold up.
Yeah, our evidence code.
From my comment, I've started to use it quite a bit at the end of a mediation, and it will hold up in Arizona. And as a former judge, I'm telling you, I'd love to get a video if there's a dispute as to whether there's a settlement or not. That's the end of discussion.
Yeah.
Just to answer Darren though, on California, our evidence code got over-lawyered when it comes to audio and video transcriptions. We have very, very specific guidelines. It's got to be reduced to writing and signed by everybody in 72 hours and all this nonsense. One thing I want to ask, there's been a lot of chat in different listservs I'm a part of about agreements that were agreed to and are they binding and enforceable and all that sort of thing. I just want to remind us, this is the non-lawyer perspective, but our job is to really truly get a meeting of the minds. And if somebody says that's not what I agreed to, or and we know that they're just changing their minds, I think that just means we're not done yet. So, the legal mindset is, can we enforce this in a court of law and hold their feet to the fire and make them do it? I think the mediator mindset is something went wrong, something changed between 5 o'clock Tuesday and 3 o'clock Wednesday afternoon. We as mediators, our job, I think, is to get in there and find that agreement and make an agreement again so that they actually agree to whatever it is that they're willing to agree to. So I want to caution us not to get too enforcement minded when we maybe should be consensus minded.
Yeah, I just want to say, from the arbitration perspective, protecting the award is obviously something that is paramount in our view. So we always have a very elaborate protocol for how the virtual hearing should be conducted. Multiple page, not 6 pages, 5 pages that go through it. And the beginning of it is always that the parties have assessed the Zoom platform, if that's what they're using, that they've concluded that it's appropriate, that there will not be a challenge to the award based on the fact that it was a virtual hearing, where the arbitration took place, to kind of dispense with that issue. The one thing that's really been the subject of considerable conversation in the field is when the parties don't agree to go virtual and one party is insisting on we'll wait till we can do it in person.
Hmm.
And whether it's a delay tactic or a real concern about their inability to properly present is a question. I think the consensus is also that under essentially all the rules, we have the power to require that it proceed on a virtual basis, but one needs to be a little careful. You know, what were the reasons given? Should you allow one adjournment? Are they just technically incapable of getting up to snuff? If that's the issue, maybe the result is different, but that has been, you know, a subject of some concern and discussion in the field. But enforceability is really bottom line, one of the things that we care about tremendously. And so we are very careful about those things.
Absolutely.
On this issue of capturing the deal, which Larry was talking about, you know, the kind of deal drift, sort of related to this, Lee, your comment too. We have a benefit in Zoom with the MOU. With what I've been doing, even frankly, I did last week, close to midnight, is put the MOU up there. Have, you know, as we're going along, many of us, I'm sure, do this, kind of develop that MOU as you see the deal in the works, and then let the people together work through it and close the gaps and capture the understanding, so we don't have the deal drift that Larry was talking about.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. So let's throw it to our veterans, Simon and Susan, who have sat quietly ruminating in the last hour or so. So Susan, here we are 6 months in. You've heard from our members as to their own experiences in their various, you know, mediation, arbitration niches and so on. I would ask if any of the members have questions for Susan or Simon on the Zoom technology front, or you know, getting to the end of the day, getting a document signed, any best practices and so on. Now's the time to put questions forward.
So one thing I would like to just point out, and it's so fascinating. I haven't spoken to as many lawyers as Susan has. As Susan is truly outstanding and a leader in this field, and it's so awesome, again, for her advocacy for pushing people online. But there's one thing that I always pick up on when I talk to people about online dispute resolution, and when we imagine our world going back to COVID-19. And I don't think the question necessarily is, are we going to get off Zoom and completely do in person, or are we going to completely just do in person, completely do Zoom? The idea of ODR, and I've been in Silicon Valley for the past 5 years creating some of these tools, is that we want technology to work for you. And I believe it was Larry or maybe it was Howard who astutely pointed out that there are so many different tools out there, right? So there's not this end-to-end platform that can fully complete the mediation or arbitration process, the enforceability, that contract automation. So I think there's just two key things that I really encourage everyone here to think about. Is A, think about how you can continue to integrate not only Zoom, but other tools into your practice to create a competitive advantage. ODR is all about using tools to make your job easier and making it easier for clients. And it just starts with Zoom, right? Think about DocuSign and keep an eye out for other tools. The second thing I'd encourage you to think about is always stay on top of learning. This Zootopia, they're expected to release a lot of new tools, so stay on top of that. Zoom is not like the law. Well, Zoom is like the law, that it constantly evolves, and there's new statutes and there's things you need to stay abreast of. And that's same with technology. The technology is really going to rapidly change, especially when it comes to remote hearings. And in particular, I was consulting, if Carl's still on the line, IP litigation. Will virtual reality and artificial intelligence play a role? You know, usually they have a product when they come to these IP litigation. Will you one day put on a headset as a mediator or arbitrator or a special court master to be able to see that product? So stay tuned to some of those advancements.
You're scaring everybody now, Simon. So virtual headsets, we're not ready for that. Give us time to get it.
They exist already. I participated in one at the ABA Tech Show last year.
Fantastic.
And it's actually pretty interesting where they put on the headset and you feel like you're in a courtroom.
Now, Susan, you were right 5 years ago about, you know, we didn't know the means by which we'd get here, but you were right that, yes, it's possible to do our jobs online, working from home, etc. Not spoiling the contents of my brief PowerPoint to come where we're going to talk about the reaction from council. But having heard what you've heard today, what do you think? I mean, are we progressing nicely, a work in progress? Where do you see the coming months going based on what you've heard today?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the last 6 months for me have been like a magic carpet ride, right? It's been what I was trying to help my colleagues understand about what I found so wonderful about online mediation 5 years ago. Suddenly, you know, I have a lot of converts and a lot of people who are interested in finding out. But I have to back up what Simon just said, because one of the, and I don't think it's an unfortunate circumstance, but I think as we all quickly pivoted, and I was helping people do it, we shifted to Zoom, which has been a wonderful platform. But as Simon said, there's so much technology out there for us. And so as we're learning, it's not just learning Zoom, it's learning how to integrate other tools with Zoom, things like he mentioned DocuSign, so important to have an e-signature platform, to have a document preparation platform. And then there are other platforms besides Zoom that were created for us as DR tech professionals, like Legaler, like Modrin, like Resolve Disputes Online, RDO, that it somewhat behooves us as professionals to be proficient in more than one platform, to offer our clients more than one platform. Because, you know, as some people have pointed out, they have clients who aren't allowed to use Zoom, or court systems that aren't using Zoom. So I do encourage us to stay on top of and continue to, you know, go with the tech flow. There's a lot of money pivoting to, you know, to the technology platforms, and there's a lot of very interesting stuff in the pipeline.
And to give a shout out briefly to Simon. Simon's a consultant, I think, with Legaler.com, which I know Ken and I think others have tried, and it works very well. It's you know, a different platform from Zoom. There isn't the massive adoption. Your grandkids won't be IT support for Legaler, but it's a really quite intuitive system. It has the ability from the outset to say, this is my real world setup. I've got a boardroom, I've got 3 caucus rooms, I've got a sidebar. You can have that as the default within your legal settings. That was one of the things we really liked about it. So it's worth a look. And when I send the follow-up email, I'll include links and some materials on that. It should be a very good backup for those counsel. I know that they shall remain nameless, but 2 national carriers that I know of are still a little nervy about using Zoom. Which they shouldn't be, but they are. So if you need workarounds, then they would be excellent for insurance cases. Okay, we're going to move at a clip because we've got a lot to cover. So I'm going to briefly share screen and go into a PowerPoint, and I'll whisk through this because we want to get to at the end of the meeting and not keep people around too long. So I'm going to share this. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, so the customer is always right, question mark. This is a survey we did over the last week to 10 days. I wanted to get the views of the litigators as to what they're thinking. We've got an idea now of what the mediators and arbitrators are thinking, but let's have a think about the customer. And if they're always right, then it gives us some idea what next year looks like. So, brief overview. We've, as of a day or two ago, we've 1121 members. We've had a number of members in their 80s thinking, you know what, screw this for a game of marbles, I'm retiring, and quite rightly so with everything going on. So, as of a day or two ago, about 89–90% of our members are using Zoom. I think that's underestimated because some folks haven't simply logged into their accounts and correctly checked off that they are doing Zoom mediations. We know from the survey, only 2% of the litigators surveyed, 500 litigators. Now, again, the demographic is DRI members and AAJ members. So these are generally insurance, tort matters, and so on, but they make up the bread and butter of mediation cases for many of our members. So only 2% historically before COVID happened had attended by video for any mediations or arbitrations. Now it's 95% of those surveyed are primarily attending Zoom mediation, so not surprisingly massive sea change. Okay, short survey has to be short, otherwise we won't get the responses. We had about a 10% response rate, which I was really happy with. Question 1, generally, how would you rate your ability to effectively advocate for your clients via Zoom as opposed to in person? Anybody shout out guesses? What do you think it'll be? Stunned silence. Okay, so I'm going to reveal. We have 68% of respondees said they thought they were about the same. 27%, 1 in 4, thought they were less effective. And 3.7% who I checked their bios and they were inevitably young bucks who are very, very comfortable with the technology. Some of the young uns thought they were, if anything, from day one with no experience, they were better advocates than before. Some of the responses, if they found it not as effective, whip through these. So they found it harder to read people, non-verbal cues, etc. I need my client in the same room as me, not the other side of a screen. They miss stepping out into the hallway, a casual downtime, water cooler talk. Everyone too focused on the software, not the case. That's just lack of comfort with the platform. That will come with time and may become the norm. This was interesting. Can't talk face-to-face with opposing counsel. No grab a snack moment. Now, I don't know, and this is one for Susan and others much brighter than I, but maybe there's some way we can allow that to happen organically within an online platform, but it's an interesting point. I think mediators think all of the strings are pulled by the mediators by their clever words and actions, but there's a little behind-the-scenes dynamic that the mediator might not be aware of, where they're having a coffee and they want a moment to chat face-to-face. That's somehow... that piece of the pie is missing, which I thought was interesting. I like this one. I like to head to the door in real mediations. I can't do that online. I love to see how that looks. If anybody can record a mediation where the toys are thrown out of the pram and they're heading for the door, I want to see how that looks in a Zoom recording, if anybody would care to send me a copy. Okay, question 2. Flipping it. Generally, how would you rate your mediator's effectiveness? And again, this was geared towards mediators rather than arbitrators. How would you affect your mediator's effectiveness in resolving disputes as compared to traditional mediations? Interesting. 72%, 3 out of 4, thought the mediator was just as effective. That's more than rated their own effectiveness as an advocate, which I thought, if anything, I thought it would be, that they would rate themselves terribly highly and the mediator didn't do as good a job. It's close, but marginally more people thought the mediator was just as effective. They didn't see a change in the platform. That was an interesting result. Again, around 1 in 4 thought it was worse. 3%, inevitably, the young bucks thought it was better, if anything. Okay, question 2. And then in terms of some of the comments as to why wasn't it as good, mediator couldn't build a rapport with the clients as well online. Working from home, participants were less invested, easily distracted. Well, again, that's something that mediators can control with their initial instructions for the setup, the environment for the mediation. They found the mediator less able to get the claimant to budge on their crazy figures. Again, a connection issue, I think, comes with time and experience. Mediator nervous the whole time of hitting a wrong button. Again, newbie pilots. Can't talk face-to-face with opposing counsel quietly in the hall online. Again, an environment issue. And all too casual, lacks the gravitas of sitting in a formal boardroom. So again, it's this buy-in concept that people feel there's a slight disconnect, if anything. Question 3. Once the pandemic's over, wave a magic wand, it's gone. Would you likely consider using Zoom platforms or other platforms for some of your mediations or arbitrations? Results. Overwhelmingly, yes. Some portion, the vast majority of respondees are comfortable doing some portion of their mediations. Of the 22% were unlikely, about 10% said, hell no, can't wait to get back to real life, hate all this. So there's a hard, I will call them the Luddites, or the unenthusiastic, the folks that dislike it are in the top 10% range, bottom 10% range, if you will, are really not keen. 12% were undecided, 2/3 or thereabouts were thumbs up to doing some portion online. So let's look at those 2/3 of people. We asked them a follow-up question. If declaring you're open to it, and 2/3 were, once the pandemic is over, what percentage of your mediation to arbitrations would you like to attend online rather than in person? Drum roll, please. Okay, so we broke it down into percentiles. 8% said, sure, I'll use it again, but in less than 25% of my cases. 18%, 1 in 5, said, sure, it'll be a plurality of my cases, so we have 30, 40, 50%. Look at the red and blue section. Basic math, 75% said they saw a majority, either 50 to 74 or 75% or more. 15% said 100% of their mediations going forward they'd like to do online. So we are looking, the market tells us, or some general comments at the end about the advantages that they saw to doing these things online. It looks like, looking at the whole pie chart, somewhere between 30 to 45% of litigators would like to do a majority of their cases online going forward. Once the pandemic's over, the wand has been waved, etc. So that's the breaking news from the clients, and it, you know, the customer's always right in that. So we'll see if that pans out. But that's the first survey that I'm aware of that's actually gone to the customers and said, what do you think of the new normal? And when we get on the other side of this, would you be open to doing a portion of your cases online? It looks, I don't think it'll be over 50% necessarily, but a large minority of cases will be, if the customer has their way, will be done online, which I think is breaking news.
Darren, one of those caught my eye really quickly. The one that says less chit chat, right down to business. I think that's on us. I think that says we're not taking the time to build rapport and get to know them on a personal level. We're coming back and saying, here's their number, what's yours? Because we're online and we're not sitting around with a cup of coffee and a Danish.
Yeah.
I think we've got to think about, are we actively building that rapport that we would normally build, even though that person said it was a positive?
And one of the more interesting, and it was a surprise when I saw it, then it was an aha moment, this idea of the water cooler talk between plaintiff and defense counsel who are, just going to get a Kit Kat or a preferred snack. How do we, Susan, perhaps for you, how do we emulate that in an online environment? If that's part of if that's 5% of the 90% of cases that settle, how do we nudge that up to be real world standards?
Well, I found, that feeling of rapport and that feeling of congeniality. Look what's been happening right here. Don't we all feel like we're all a part of the same presentation and working together? I mean, everyone has talked about the fact that you get your communication perhaps even more clearly through the screen. And that goes to the statistics that say our communication is 55% our facial expression. Goes way beyond the words that we say. That's only 7% of our communication. So this format is actually very well suited to communicating, to having those moments with people. What you have to do is think ahead about how you're going to create those little moments with people. I love that someone said the attorneys don't get that little, hey, let's go get a candy bar in the coffee room sort of thing and have that moment. There are ways to try and recreate that. One of the things that I do is pull the attorneys into a breakout room to have a little chat with me and then say, you know what, I just need to pop out for a second, and I leave them there. Just so
That's
they
great.
can, I'll be right back.
That's
but create that opportunity for them. I know it's contrived, but they don't know that. They think it, it's the same as if they toddled off and ran into each other in the coffee room.
That's wonderful.
Virtual backgrounds are a great way of doing that. Lee J, I'd love to see what stadium is behind you. Where are those mountains on, for example, is another quick and easy way.
Well, I agree with Susan and Lee J. It's on us to learn how to use this tool much better. Develop that rapport. It's there. I mean, we just have to find the right button.
Yeah. And again, it's the 10,000 or we're a couple of hundred hours. Some folks are 1,000, 2,000 hours in. You're not a veteran until you're at the 10,000 hour mark. It's the black swan theory. Okay.
And I actually set up a breakout room called the kitchen.
Right.
There's a hall and a kitchen and something else. And just this morning, I had two rounds with just the lawyers where I kind of force it. But to Susan's point, they get to see the facial expressions, and it's harder to use quite as many expletives when they're looking at each other in the screen. And so I kind of force it, but it's possible. And you can change the background, to Simon's point. Put a background of a kitchen and the candy bars.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. Good. Okay. Well, let's move on. I think if there's any other questions for Susan or any discussions on the back of that finding from our PowerPoint, is anybody surprised by those figures?
Not really.
No, I'm taking it as read that Simeon.
I'll say I'm surprised to see how substantial the litigators intend to use in the future is. I thought that was very impressive.
I was a little surprised to find that they felt that the mediator was more effective as a neutral than they were themselves as an marginally so. But the idea that I think media is a bit flogging themselves to and saying, oh, I'm 15% less effective, 20% less effective. Yeah, your customers don't think so. And one point I would say very much on the business end, I've had one or two members say, you know what, I'm brushing my teeth at 8:30. I'm in session at 9 o'clock. I'm obviously not charging travel costs. Should I adjust my rates down given that I'm doing everything online? The easy answer is hell no. Don't even think about it. It devalues the service that our members provide. So for umpteen reasons, do not consider, by all means waive any standard travel fees because you're not traveling. But hourly rates going down seems like the worst idea in the world. So I'd strongly advise against that. Let's briefly move on to other business then, because we've done the surprise PowerPoint. I'm going to embarrass Edna Sussman. The last few years, we've had a Distinguished Neutral of the Year award that is an honor presented to two of our former award winners are here. Jay Berman in 2018, it's all a blur now, 2017, I forget. Doug Noll, Jay for commercial mediation and ADR training. Doug for his exemplary work in training and negotiation work over recent decades. Tony Piazza was our award winner last year for commercial mediation. So our group being a broad church, the thought was that it's the arbitrator's turn, and there was a very short list that became even shorter when we sort of started calling around saying, who does everybody agree would be a good name? So I'm not going to embarrass Edna too much. If anybody in the arbitration sector in America knows of Edna's reputation and work, briefly, I'm going to go through the formal bio just briefly. Edna's a full-time arbitrator and mediator, was appointed Distinguished ADR Practitioner in Residence for the Fordham University School of Law. She started her career as an associate and litigation partner at the renowned international law firm White & Case. And over the past 20 years, she has served as an arbitrator in several hundred complex disputes, both domestic and international. Edna serves on leading ADR panels around the world and has conducted arbitrations under most institutional rules. She serves as one of just 6 arbitration trainers for the AAA. She's the former president of the College of Commercial Arbitrators, serves on the board of the AAA, as chair of the New York International Arbitration Center, and recently, recently stepped down as chair of the AAA's ICDR Charitable Foundation. Edna has published and lectured extensively on arbitration and mediation and wins annual recognition for her work as an arbitrator from many groups, including Chambers UK, my friends in London, Chambers USA, the who's who of international arbitration and mediation, and best lawyers. My friends in London at Chambers UK have previously interviewed various counts, so as have I, speak of lots of litigation firms over the months. And some of the lovely comments have come back regarding her work as an arbitrator on various cases. She's variously been described as a leader in the ADR field, extremely well prepared, well read, and incredibly smart, and really good at cutting right to the point. So I shan't embarrass her by reading these various bullet points. What I would like to do, as is our custom in recent years, I've invited Gene Farber, himself a world-class arbitrator, sir, and I think also a former president of the College of Commercial Arbitrators. Mediation is a very isolated practice. Mediators don't tend to see other mediators in action. The opposite is the case with arbitrators. For the major cases, there are often 3-chair panels. And I know Jean has literally seen Edna in action at the cutting edge of various large complex cases. So I'll hand the floor to my friend Jean, and he can suitably embarrass our friend Edna before she formally receives the award. Jean, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Darren, and it's really an honor to speak of Edna and presenting this award. I can't think of anyone who deserves it more. In the 5 areas roughly that Darren has mentioned, Edna's work has been prolific. I mean, think about it, virtually every major position in this country regarding arbitration, Edna has held. And think further, how many of us on this Zoom meeting started a charity? It's really incredible. Just think, Edna had the idea that we neutrals should give back. And, you know, we're pretty fortunate. We have good, we do well in our profession. We're paid better than the judges are paid. And Edna had the idea that we should ask neutrals to give back, and she had the concept, the development. She created the foundation at the American Arbitration Association. And over the years, the millions that have been raised from the neutrals community principally have been used to help people who can't afford to help themselves through the legal process. And if we just sit back and think about it, this is incredible. And I admire her so for it. You heard about her teaching abilities, Fordham Law. There are probably hundreds of arbitrators all over the country who've been trained by her. She's a prolific author. Just look at her bio. I mean, the topics: dispositive motions, enforcement of international awards, baseball arbitration. That's the only part I disagree with on Edna. You know, she's a Yankee fan, unfortunately, so can't help that. But and she carries a full docket. It's incredible. It would probably be easier for me to list the areas where she has not presided over cases than the areas where she has. Commercial, international, pharma cases, IP, tech, aviation. It just goes on in every single area. But the point is the way she does it. You may not agree with her on a point, but she is decent. She's smart. She's hardworking. She's careful. I have never, and I've sat with her, perhaps Edna, in maybe a half dozen cases.
Something like that, yeah.
Going back to a school case on Long Island.
Yeah, that was a crazy one.
That was a crazy one. Which got to be like 25 years ago. It actually made the front page of the Law Journal.
Yep.
We've awarded punitive damages together in arbitration, right, Edna?
Yep.
But she has done it with sensitivity, with dignity, with smarts, and above all, one of the most gracious people I have ever met. Absolutely incredible. When parties leave a hearing, no matter what the result, they know they had a fair hearing. They know that their arguments have been heard and considered fairly by someone who's smart, by someone, if she doesn't know that law, she will read it and learn it. And, you know, I really think of all the practitioners of commercial arbitration in the world, I can't think of anyone more deserving. And I'm honored to salute Edna and thank her for all the hours and hours that she has donated to benefit me and to benefit every single one at this Zoom meeting. You know, if we were in a room together right now, and maybe this is the one disadvantage, but I'm going to try to make an advantage of it because we've just spent the last speaking about the difference. I'm going to ask everyone to unmute right now.
Yeah, quite right.
And then I would like a rousing round of applause for Edna Sussman.
Congratulations, Edna.
Edna, congratulations on being named the Distinguished Neutral of the Year by the NADS. Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't actually know what to say after all of that. So I really appreciate all the very, very kind remarks. Jean and I do go back a long way, and we have had many cases together, and we have had our disagreements, but I think always with great respect for one another's view, and always the ability to ultimately, after a great deal of discussion, come to consensus and resolution and feel good about where we came out. And everybody ends up feeling like we came out with the right decision.
And confirmation of every single
yes,
award,
and
right?
Confirmation of everyone. And parties that have felt good about it because they've come back to us for subsequent cases. So I think they've always felt very good about the process. And thank you, Darren, who I think I met way back in 2008 when you started circling the country to look for neutrals to recruit for your excellent organization.
I had hair back in those days.
Yeah, well, we all had some other things back then we won't even mention. But, you know, you have really grown this organization incredibly over the years. And I really am deeply appreciative and honored for getting this award. I guess I'm especially honored to be recognized for the first time for achievement in arbitration as opposed to mediation. I am a great believer in the benefits of mediation, and over the years I have done a lot, although my practice now really focuses almost exclusively on arbitration. But I'm a very strong advocate for mediation. I actually have one very interesting case now where they wrote into the contract, it's kind of like a dispute board. We're brought on initially to meet the parties, and it's written in how often we meet to learn the business and to help them facilitate through any disputes. But if they ever end up with an insoluble dispute, we are going to become the arbitrators, which is kind of interesting in a pure commercial manufacturer distributor kind of context. But I thought that was fabulous because I think helping people get through to resolution is really what we're about. But I think there are situations where you can't do it just by talking, and they do need another process, and arbitration is a good vehicle. And I would argue better than the courts in many respects, especially in the international arena. But I do think as we move forward, and it's one of the projects I'm working on, I think we're going to see more crossover of techniques that are used in one discipline into the other, going really in both directions. In mediation, using more arbitration kinds of tools, and arbitration perhaps using more mediation kinds of tools, because ultimately our goal is to help the parties get to resolution and to get the resolution that is most satisfactory for them. So I think we are going to start seeing that kind of crossover. So again, I guess, I think that the recognition of arbitration in this award is really a recognition of the breadth and inclusion of all kinds of dispute resolution processes by the NADN. And I think Darren and all those who participated in my selection for the award this year, I thank all of you. And it's a huge honor to be so honored.
And I have to ask, have you got the trophy on your desk? Is it around anywhere?
Oh, no, it's downstairs. Sorry.
I
should have thought of it.
We'll put a press release out on Monday.
Good, thank you.
So it'll be in the press. Wonderful. Okay. Well, without further ado, just one or two small pieces of other business. Roseanne asked me, she who must be a maid, asked me to remind the members that we'll be sending an email. I think she'll be sending an email out next week. We've got nominations coming up in October. So she'll put an email blast out. And if any of the members have non-Academy members that they think are now in the ballpark for consideration, we'll get an email blast out for any peer nominations to be completed in October. I'll get together with the state committees and review any of those folks that are on the nominee list, probably in end of October. Finally, something of a teaser. Very nebulous, but I've been thinking recently about if there are keywords that can sum up NADN over recent years. I hope collegiality and excellence will be amongst them. Expediency is probably one of the key things people associate with NADN, because we've got our website, we've got the calendar functionality that sees 700-800 appointments a day scheduled online through our server, and we've made the scheduling process in particular really quite painless for law firms over recent years. And so expediency may have been a keyword of the last decade or so, thanks to our website. I've been giving a lot of thought to the word efficiencies and how we might perhaps be able to help Academy members in other ways. All very nebulous and all very low, but it's taking up a lot of my time beyond my day job of being executive director of Nadn. So I'll leave you with that thought. It's taking up a lot of bandwidth because who needs sleep is my headline. So there may be news to come on that in the coming weeks as those ideas come together. So with that, I think having overrun by a good hour or so, but I think it's been worthwhile. We'll call it a wrap. Thank you very much indeed to our distinguished guests and panelists for taking the time out, more than was scheduled into your diary. So I'm very grateful for your contributions all. To the folks watching, our Academy members, thank you so much for tuning in. Those that couldn't will get a YouTube video of this, so you'll see it on the weekend over a coffee. I'm a little disappointed nobody turned up in dressing gown and slippers. That was an option, but all very professional, I'd say. So to the members, thank you all so much for tuning in. Stay busy, stay relatively sane, and do all please stay well. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Darren, for all you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
We echo that. Thank you.
Darren.
Thank you, everyone.